Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Over the next half an hour, we'll be looking beyond the business headlines by giving you in-depth perspective on the stories that are affecting all of us. Coming up on today's show. Next week, the UK's Department for International Trade will host the Africa Investment Conference, bringing together UK and African businesses for a one-day virtual event. I'll be discussing this and more with Bibi Olufore in Abuja. She's a special assistant at Nigeria's Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, and Chief Bimbo Roberts Folayan. He'll be joining us from Kent. He's the CEO of the Nigerian Diaspora Direct Investment Summit. Later on in the show, we'll be looking at the biggest company news stories of the week. Let's start the programme with news from here in the UK, where tens of millions of people are living under a third national lockdown. COVID-19 is still raging in the Isles, and although almost 3 million people have received a first dose of vaccination, there doesn't appear to be an end in sight for when restrictions will finally be lifted.
Since Christmas Day, there are 13,000 more patients in hospital with COVID-19. And less than a fortnight into 2021, the number of people in hospital with COVID has already gone up by a third, a rise of around 8,000. We're seeing stubbornly high levels of infection and, unfortunately, death too, which is the sadly inevitable consequence of the rapid spread of the virus in recent weeks. Hospitals throughout the country are now seeing significant and sustained pressure from those rising numbers of COVID-19 patients. This is an extremely serious moment for the country. And as good news as the vaccine is, it cannot be seen by any of us as a free pass to ignore the national guidance.
It's also a serious moment for business. Earlier in the week, the Federation of Small Businesses, representing over 160,000 companies in the country, said a recent survey they conducted suggests that up to 290,000 SMEs could go bust by the end of the year without further financial support. But this support is unlikely to come before the British government's spring budget in March, as Chancellor Rishi Sunak ruled out additional measures during a statement given to lawmakers in the House of Commons earlier this week. So far, the British government has spent almost £250 billion in loans, grants and other economic support for British business and workers. Well, for more of this, I'm now being joined by our business correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, so despite a chorus of calls from business leaders, we're not expecting there to be any more government support during this third national lockdown, are we?
Yeah, no, we're not. Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, has come out and said that things are going to get worse before they get better for businesses. He says that since February, since the sort of first lockdown, that 800,000 people have been made unemployed from their jobs since before that point. And so, as you said, there were a number of people hoping that because of this new lockdown and harsher restrictions than ever, really, that there are going to be more benefits for businesses, more sort of grants. There is this grant of £9,000 for retail hospitality, of up to £9,000 if they have a property. But yeah, he's saying we need to wait until March, until the next budget, and then they're going to reevaluate, and then they'll obviously roll out more things based on what the sort of conditions are likely then. There's also bad news in terms of unemployment, that the governor of the Bank of England believes that the UK's jobless rate has climbed to around 6.5%. That's 2.2 million people, which is higher than official figures had suggested over the past 3 months. He said that in a speech, he was also guarded on whether interest rates could be deployed to help boost growth following the latest lockdowns. He also referenced Winston Churchill's use of the phrase, the UK's darkest hour, saying that there's a lot more that we need to go through. Also bad news in terms of retail. Retailers suffered their worst annual sales performance on record in 2020. That's on record is for the last 25 years, so that's significant. It's only an overall fall of 0.3%, but that's still the worst annual change since those figures sort of came into. So there's a lot of issues, and there's also a few Brexit issues coming in Northern Ireland. I don't know if you've been following this. A few supermarket shelves being empty based on the fact that there are now these new checks and balances for food entering Northern Ireland from the UK. They now have to go through all these processes, and all of the main stores, Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Asda, Iceland Co-op, and Marks and Spencer, they've all written to the government, to Michael Gove, saying that the current system is unworkable, and he said he's set up a team that are going to look into this. But those pictures obviously is what people were fearing when Brexit happened initially. country. Now, since the 31st of December, food products entering Northern Ireland from Great Britain do need to be checked. So there's all of those kind of things. I guess the light at the end of the tunnel is that we are getting vaccinations faster apparently than any other country. It's now something like 30% of those over the age of 80 are having those vaccines, and that does seem to be going smoother than maybe a lot of people had feared. So maybe that is the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of businesses and opening back up, is that the vaccination rollout does seem to be going well, but otherwise a fairly gloomy outlook at the moment for businesses.
Gloomy outlook in a gloomy January. Thank you, Simon. Here's some other business news from across the globe. China's consumer price index moved back into positive territory last month, raising hopes that the country's economic recovery will further bolster demand at a time when core inflation remains weak. At one supermarket in Beijing, vegetable prices have increased by almost 10%. The outbreak of African swine fever in the summer of 2018 led to the culling of millions of pigs, which raised the price of pork, one of the most important components in the country's CPI. Last summer, pork prices increased 86% year on year. Israel is leading the rest of the world with its 24/7 vaccination program and is now beginning to inoculate people as young as 55. The Middle Eastern country has raced ahead by squeezing every last dose out of its vaccine supplies, and it's using its efficient health system to launch a round-the-clock immunisation drive with military help. The country's relaxed rules about who can turn up for a jab has meant that more than 100,000 people between the ages of 20 and 40 have already been inoculated by last week, many of them without any pre-existing conditions. Republicans in the US Congress are facing growing backlash from businesses that said they would cut off campaign contributions to those who voted last week to challenge President-elect Joe Biden's victory. Senators Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley led the challenge to certification in the Senate. The announcements by Amazon, General Electric, American Express, among many others, threaten to throttle fundraising resources for Republicans who will soon be out of power in the White House and both chambers of Congress. Now over to our main topic. Last year, Channel's Business Global were right front and centre at the inaugural UK African Investment Summit, hosted by British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. During the one-day event, 27 trade and investment deals worth £6.5 billion and commitments worth £8.9 billion were announced. Next week, the UK Department for International Trade will host the virtual Africa Investment Conference to explore how inclusive, sustainable and resilient investment can serve to help countries across Africa. Nigeria is expected to play a major part. To discuss what that role will look like, I'm now being joined by Bibi Olufore in Abuja. She's a special assistant at Nigeria's Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. Bibi Olufore, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. I know you're a very busy lady, so I do appreciate you taking this time out. Next week, the UK will once again be playing host for African nations. They've got the African Investment Conference coming up just a year after they hosted the UK African Investment Summit in London. I know you played a really key role there. Can we expect Nigeria to be a centre keystone as Britain tries to renew its relationship with Africa?
Indeed, Juliana, thank you and good morning. Nigeria will play a key role in the UK Africa Investment Conference, which is coming up. And this is because through our sustained engagements in the last 1 year on the Economic Development Forum, we have gained a lot of traction. And this Economic Development Forum was actually launched by the President, Muhammadu Buhari, as well as the Prime Minister, Theresa May. And these development forums are actually to foster development ties between Nigeria and the UK. We have done a lot, and in 2020, despite the COVID-19 and the limitations that it posed on us, it actually provided us opportunities to look at new ways of working together. We held 2 virtual economic development forums with the Trade Minister and my minister, and we have been able to actually institutionalize some of the business dialogues that are going on to promote these ties, increase exports, and look to strategic partnerships with UK government and UK companies. Thank you.
Absolutely. I know you've been really busy. I do follow the ministry on social media, including Twitter and Instagram, and you're constantly holding these virtual investment summits, which is great. But of course, you know, COVID struck in 2020. I know you briefly mentioned it just now, but how has that affected your ministry, particularly when one of the key cornerstones of trade is being able to travel, being able to engage with countries within their nations. How has it been a setback for you, and how has it benefited you in some ways?
It has been a setback in many ways, and this is, of course, because with bilateral engagements, it's a lot of face-to-face that we have to do. But in spite of that, as earlier mentioned, we have actually looked to virtual collaborations that has really worked in our favor. And we've actually even digitally signed some of the communiques between the UK and Nigeria. And these are communiques that have been put in place where we have memorandums of understanding on how we want to promote trade, how we want to support our MSMEs, and how we want to see both countries leverage Brexit and the AFCFTA.
It's good that you mentioned Brexit and the African Continental Free Trade Area, because, of course, even though it doesn't feel like a new year, it is. And on January the 1st, it did mark a beginning for two monumental trading blocks. What has the ministry's role been in AfCFTA, and what is the ministry's role in kind of promoting post-Brexit British relations?
So in AFCFTA, of course, we were custodians of the ratification. And we put together the instrument for ratification and deposited that at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. And right now, as a ratified member state, we are actively participating in the AFCFTA. We have an implementation program that's currently going on where we're looking to mobilize everything as well as harness reforms that will help position us, both intra-Africa and globally.
What about post-Brexit? We're in the diaspora, and sometimes, especially those of us in London, we're a bit more free with how we speak about Britain's historical relationship with Nigeria. There have been some concerns. We don't want to be at the table but not having a strong voice at the table. Do we have more kind of bargaining power, would you say?
Britain and Nigeria actually have very strong bonds, and these bonds have been enjoyed over time. I don't see that dwindling. I actually see that because of everything that we have done with the British government, in the last 1 year, we've had the Commonwealth trade envoy visit Nigeria. We've had the UK trade envoy, Helen Grant, visit Nigeria. We have very frequent virtual dialogues with UK businesses and the UK government, especially the trade department colleagues. We work hand in hand with these people, and we're looking for we envisage stronger partnerships that will drive growth. We are also looking to partnerships with the UK to leverage the 1.3 billion AFCFTA market. We have had strong ties. We have had a lot of, within the manufacturing sector alone, we have a lot of UK-originated companies that we're hoping we will sustain their business and expand it into other services that will be able to penetrate the AFCFTA market through Nigeria.
Absolutely, and hopefully, Bibi, that will start trickling down to those who so desperately need it in Nigeria. We're running out of time, but let's just lastly go back to next week's conference. It seems as if renewable energy, healthcare and agri-tech are kind of the top investment sectors for those in Britain and also those across the world. Do you think this interest is likely to shift into other sectors, or are these kind of the mainstay of where you can make your money?
These are the businesses that we have focused on in the recent past. And of course, with the pandemic, what happened was that we also got some vulnerabilities exposed as well as opportunities in the health sector, in logistics, and also it showed that we needed to kind of like put more effort into our trade facilitation efforts, and that is what we are doing. The government approved the e-customs project, which is going to enable the national single window, and we're hoping to work collaboratively with the Presidential Council on the Ease of Doing Business to ensure that the omnibus bill gets sent to the National Assembly for approval. And as soon as this is enacted into law, we want to begin to see the implementation of more reforms that will drive more economic growth.
Wow. Bibi Olufore, very senior special assistant at the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. Thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global, and I can't wait to welcome you back to London sometime soon once we get these infectious cases back down. Bibi, thank you so much for joining me on the show. In a moment, I'll be speaking with Chief Bimbo Roberts-Folayan, but before then, here's some company news for you. Twitter stock fell as much as 12% on Monday after the social media company permanently suspended President Donald Trump's account on Friday evening. The share price decline wiped $5 billion from Twitter's market capitalization. The social media giant's bosses suspended Trump's account, which had about 88 million followers, after the world leader's fanning of conspiracy theories about voter fraud and election theft spurred thousands of his supporters to lay siege to the Capitol last week. Dr. Martens, the classic British boot brand, plans to float on the London Stock Exchange in what would be one of the first big initial public offerings of 2021. The company, which sells more than 11 million pairs of shoes every year in more than 60 countries, agreed to be taken over in 2013 by the private equity group Permira for £300 million. The investment group, which owns about 75% of the brand, plans to float at least 25% of the company. JD Sports Fashion has upped its profit guidance by more than £100 million following robust demand in the second half of last year. The retailer said it now expected pre-tax profit for the 12 months to the 30th of January this year to hit at least £400 million, ahead of the current market expectations of £295 million. JD Sports said total revenue for the 22 weeks to the 2nd of January 2021 were more than 5% ahead of previous years, but did not provide exact figures. Now we continue with our main topic. Next week, the UK Department for International Trade will host the virtual Africa Investment Conference to explore how inclusive, sustainable and resilient investment can serve to help countries across the continent. Africans in the diaspora have played a key role in bridging the gap between the UK and Africa, including my next guest, the CEO of the Nigerian Diaspora Direct Investment Summit, Chief Bimbo Roberts-Folayan. Chief Bimbo Roberts-Folayan, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. It's been a while. I know you were one of our first guests in the studio a couple of years ago, and look what the last year has been like. The UK economy, one of the worst affected G7 economies because of COVID-19. I know a lot of your members must have been affected with this kind of shift to e-commerce, particularly because many people aren't online. Is that true? How's it been for you?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, Juliana. Nice to see you again. It's been a very challenging time. Most of our members have been struggling. Well, luckily, many of us have had to adjust into conducting most of our businesses online. But then there are a lot of the organizations who are involved in social enterprise, particularly, they've had to shift online to reach out to many of their, clients and all that, and for us to have summits and seminars and conferences. But there are a lot of other ones that cannot operate online or haven't got enough resources to actually get online. For example, training. Some of our SME members are involved in training, and it's going to cost a huge amount of money to set up the portals to be able to then train some of their staff. Not just that, the students are not coming forward as well, and so it's been very challenging. We are in uncharted waters right now.
We are in uncharted territory, and I think it's important to make that clear, especially for our viewers in Nigeria. Sometimes, in the diaspora, it's seen as the place of milk and honey, but I think COVID-19 has really exposed some of those myths, hasn't it? And we were speaking before to the Ministry of Investment and Trade. They're going to play a significant part in next week's UK Africa Investment Conference. I was there last year where Boris Johnson hosted African leaders. And the only thing is, with these really big events, you kind of look around the room sometimes and you're like, okay, well, where are the SMEs? Where are the bread and butter, those Nigerian businesses, those small but mighty, significant businesses that play a key role, but then sometimes are shunned out of these big deals? Do you feel that's the case, or how are you and some of your members going to be involved in next week's virtual summit?
Actually, you've said the same thing. With the SME, particularly the Nigerian and the African diaspora, it's been shut out again for the second time. Last year, when it was kickstarted, the same thing happened, and a lot of our members had to force their way to find ways of attending. And this year, the organizers have gone the same way. A new trade envoy to Nigeria has just MP Helen, has just been appointed, and we're making moves to reach out to her to let her know the role of the diaspora. Most of our members actually operate within the SME sectors. Most of the African businesses are actually small, medium, some of them actually micro businesses in the UK. And it's very unfortunate that nothing is usually done to reach out to all of these businesses. Last year, we took this up with all the organizers, and they said it was because of some lapse in the planning. And they promised us that something was going to be done. But this year, I personally even heard about the date when I was in Nigeria. I was in Mrs. Abike Dabiri's office, and she was even the one that reminded me of the date. So the same issue that we had the last time is what we're having right now. But we plan to do something after this particular event so that it doesn't repeat itself next year. Because the diaspora plays so much important role in smoothing the trade relationship between the UK and Nigeria, and Africa in general and Nigeria in particular. In actual fact, we're planning to set up a task force that will be working on, actually streamlining some of these investments that we want to do with Nigeria in a few weeks' time. And so we need to reach out to them.
Absolutely. I know they'll be watching this, so hopefully they'll hear your calls. We know for any a big Western democracy, your small to medium-sized enterprise, they're the engine and the heartbeat of an economy. So it's pretty bizarre that they're not keeping you afloat. Hopefully that will change. You spoke about the diaspora remittances, diaspora mortgage, diaspora voting. They're floating around again in 2021. Are these just dreams, or is there a reality? Is the diaspora really going to start getting involved in, the foundation and the renewal and the building of Nigeria? I know the chairman of the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Abike Dabiri, is doing as much as she can, but people are asking when.
I think we're getting there, gradually getting there. Mrs. Abike Dabiri, is actually doing very well with NITCOM.
She is.
Reaching out to the diaspora. Recently, a Nigerian Diaspora Investment Trust Fund committee was set up by NITCOM in partnership with the Minister for, I think it was Minister for Foreign Affairs. And so we spent about 14 weeks putting together the guidelines for setting up a Nigerian Diaspora Investment Trust Fund. And that report has just been submitted to NITCOM. And we're hoping that in the next few weeks or months, something will be set up. Also, with regards to diaspora voting, there's a lot of work that is going behind the scene, and things can only get better. So Nigeria is taking a step towards getting closer to actually working very hard with its diaspora. With the setup of NITCOM, we've seen some progress being made in the past few months, and a lot of work is underground, and it's taking, gradually getting to where we think we ought to be. So we can only keep our fingers crossed and see what happens in the next few months.
Chief Bimbo Roberts Folayan, thank you so much for joining me on Channels Business Global, and do keep us updated in all of the events that you have coming up over the next couple of months. Thank you, Chief. Sadly, that's all we have time for today, but do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channels Business Global. Goodbye.